contradiction in the accounts regarding the prediction of Peter's denial. The four Gospel accounts agree that Jesus explicitly told Peter that he would deny him 3 times on the night of his arrest, and that Peter expressed confidence in himself, declaring his loyalty to Jesus and his willingness to remain faithful to him. However, when these 4 accounts are compared, clear differences appear in the context, the sequence of events, the nature and content of the dialogue, and the reasons that led Peter to declare his loyalty. Is Jesus' address directed to the disciples or to Peter only? Both the Gospel of Matthew chapter 26 verses 31 to 34 and the Gospel of Mark chapter 14 verses 27 to 30 state that Jesus told the disciples that they would all be made to stumble because of him that night, citing the prophecy, "I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered." He also stated that after his resurrection he would go before them into Galilee. Matthew and Mark therefore present the discourse in a collective setting, where Jesus addresses all the disciples. In the Gospel of Luke chapter 22 verses 31 and 32, however, the discourse is directed specifically to Simon Peter. Jesus says to him, "Simon, Simon, indeed, Satan has asked for you, that he may sift you as wheat. But I have prayed for you, that your faith should not fail, and when you have returned to me, strengthen your brethren." In the Gospel of John chapter 13 verse 36, the discourse is also directed to Peter, but without any mention of the disciples being made to stumble or Peter losing faith. Instead, John presents a different dialogue in which Peter asks Jesus, "Lord, where are you going?" Jesus answers him, "Where I am going you cannot follow me now, but you shall follow me afterward." How many times would the rooster crow? The 4 Gospels agree that Jesus foretold that Peter would deny him 3 times before the rooster crowed. The Gospel of Matthew chapter 26 verse 34 mentions a single crowing of the rooster, as Jesus said to Peter, "Assuredly, I say to you that this night, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times." Both Luke chapter 22 verse 34 and John chapter 13 verse 38 agree with Matthew, likewise mentioning only 1 crowing of the rooster. Mark chapter 14 verse 30, however, differs by mentioning 2 crowings of the rooster. Jesus says to Peter, "Assuredly, I say to you that today, even this night, before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times." Where did Jesus tell Peter that he would deny him 3 times? According to Matthew chapter 26 verses 30 to 35 and Mark chapter 14 verses 26 to 31, after the Lord's Supper Jesus and his disciples sang a hymn and went out to the Mount of Olives. It was on the way there that Jesus told Peter he would deny him that night. According to Luke chapter 22 verses 31 to 39, however, this occurred during the supper itself, inside the room and before they went out to the Mount of Olives. After Jesus instructed his disciples to buy swords, they told him that they had 2 swords, and he replied, "It is enough." Then he went to the Mount of Olives, as he was accustomed, and his disciples also followed him. John agrees with Luke that the prediction of Peter's denial took place during the supper inside the room. In John chapter 13 verses 36 to 38, a dialogue between Jesus and Peter is recorded that differs from the Synoptic Gospels. John further includes an extended farewell discourse by Jesus from chapters 14 to 17, containing teachings about abiding in him, the promise of the Helper, and prayer for the unity of believers. Then, in chapter 18 verse 1, John states that Jesus went out with his disciples over the brook Kidron, where there was a garden, which he and his disciples entered. Did Peter declare his loyalty before the prediction of denial or after it? According to Matthew chapter 26 verses 34 and 35, and Mark chapter 14 verses 30 and 31, Peter declared his loyalty to Jesus immediately after Jesus foretold that he would deny him that night. According to Luke chapter 22 verses 33 and 34, and John chapter 13 verses 37 and 38, however, Peter first declared his loyalty to Jesus, and only afterward did Jesus predict that he would deny him. In what context did Peter declare his loyalty to Jesus? In Matthew chapter 26 verses 31 to 33, and Mark chapter 14 verses 27 to 29, Jesus says that all the disciples would stumble because of him that night, citing the scripture, "I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered." Peter then responds, Even if all are made to stumble because of you, I will never be made to stumble. Thus, according to Matthew and Mark, Peter's declaration of loyalty is a direct response to Jesus' announcement that all the disciples would stumble because of him. In Luke chapter 22 verses 31 to 33, however, the context is entirely different. Jesus does not speak about all the disciples being scattered, but instead addresses Simon directly. Simon, Simon. Indeed, Satan has asked for you, that he may sift you as wheat. Jesus then says that he prayed for Peter so that his faith would not fail. Peter replies, Lord, I am ready to go with you, both to prison and to death. Here, Peter's declaration is not a response to a prophecy that all the disciples would be made to stumble, but rather follows a personal spiritual warning concerning Satan's testing. In John chapter 13 verses 36 and 37, the scene differs radically. There is no mention of the disciples being scattered or of Satan sifting them. Instead, Peter asks, Lord, where are you going? When Jesus tells him that he cannot follow him now, Peter says, Lord, why can I not follow you now? I will lay down my life for your sake. Thus, Peter's declaration here is motivated by his refusal to accept that he could not accompany Jesus.